When you look at the underwater world, it's this constant, incredible dance of survival. And for fish, a huge part of winning that game comes down to what's on the menu. We're talking everything from microscopic plankton all the way up to other fish. What they eat and how they eat it, well, that's a seriously fascinating story of adaptation and evolution.
So how in the world did they pull it off? I mean, how did fish evolve to master literally every menu in the water? From scraping algae off a rock to chasing down another fish on the run, it's amazing. And that's the big question we're going to dive into today.
So here's what we've got lined up. We're going to explore their world of appetites, then we'll break down their digestive blueprint. After that, we'll check out what's on the ocean's menu, uncover 5 master strategies they use to get food, and then we'll take a look at their incredible eater's toolkit. And finally, we'll follow that whole journey from bite to energy. All right, let's get into it. Okay, first things first, we need to get one core idea down. A fish isn't just, well, a fish. It's really a product of its environment and, maybe most importantly, its diet. Think about it. What a fish eats literally shapes its body. We're talking its teeth, the length of its gut, even its overall body shape. These are all adaptations for a very specific diet. You've heard the saying, form follows function, right? Well, in the world of fish, that function is almost always about finding and eating food. Okay, so to really appreciate all the crazy variety out there, we've got to start with the basics. Think of it like the standard model or the ground plan of the fish digestive system. This is the blueprint that evolution has been tinkering with and customizing for millions of years. So let's use a really common fish as our model, a spiny-rayed, bony fish, what's known as a teleost. So food comes into the mouth, goes through the oral cavity and into the pharynx, and get this, they often have extra sets of teeth on the roof of the mouth and even near the gills. From there, it's down the esophagus to the stomach for the first stage of breakdown, and finally into the intestines where all the nutrients get absorbed. This basic pathway, this is the foundation for all the wild variations we're about to get into.
And believe me, the variations are just incredible. Take the ancient jawless fish, like a lamprey. They don't have true hinged jaws or a real stomach. It's just a super simple digestive tract with a special fold inside to help absorb nutrients. But then you get the jawed fish. They evolved true jaws and a dedicated stomach. And that was a complete game changer. It was a revolutionary step that opened up a way wider range of feeding strategies.
So what you're seeing here are 3 totally different evolutionary solutions to the exact same problem. How do you maximize the nutrients you get from your food? The lamprey goes for a simple, straight intestine. The shark, it developed this super clever, compact gut with something called a spiral valve inside. Picture a spiral staircase, which massively increases the surface area. And then you have the bony teleost fish, which just uses a really long, coiled intestine. 3 different designs, and each one is a masterclass in efficiency, perfectly tuned for a different way of life. All right, so we've seen the hardware, the digestive machinery. Now let's talk about what all this equipment is actually designed to process. What exactly is on the menu in the underwater world?
Generally speaking, fish fall into 4 main dietary camps. First, you've got your carnivores, like a tuna, that hunt other animals. Then you have the herbivores that munch on plants. You've also got omnivores, like an adult tilapia, that'll eat a bit of both. And then you have the really specialized ones, the parasites, like that lamprey again, which actually feed on the blood and tissues of other fish. This food pyramid is a great way to visualize how energy flows. Right at the bottom, you have the primary producers. Think plants and algae. Then the herbivores come along and eat them. In turn, those herbivores get eaten by carnivores. And it just keeps going up the chain, all the way to the apex predators at the very top. It's this really delicate transfer of energy from one level to the next. But, and this is a really crucial point, a fish doesn't stay in the same spot on that pyramid its whole life. Not even close. A tiny little larva might start out eating algae, but by the time it's an adult, it could be eating other fish. This constant shifting is what turns those simple food chains we learned about into these incredibly complex and tangled food webs. So, knowing what they eat is half the story. But how do they actually get that food? Well, it turns out fish have developed 5 core strategies for this. Let's run through these 5 main strategies. You've got your predators, like sharks, that actively hunt and capture live prey. Then there are the grazers, like parrotfish, who scrape their food right off of surfaces like rocks. You have strainers, like herring, that are basically filtering tiny organisms out of the water. Then the suckers, like catfish, who ingest their food by sifting through mud and sediment. And finally, the parasites, like lampreys, that attach themselves to a host. Each one is a completely unique evolutionary path. And what's really cool is that even within just one of these strategies, like being a predator, there are totally different game plans. On one hand, you have the active hunters, like a tuna. They're built for pure speed and endurance. On the other hand, you have ambush predators, like a grouper. They're masters of disguise, just lying in wait for that perfect moment for an explosive surprise attack. Two completely different ways to get the same job done.
Okay, now for the fun part. Let's open up the biological toolkit. What are the specific physical tools, the adaptations that fish have evolved to absolutely perfect these feeding strategies?
And you don't have to look any further than the mouth. It's all about having the right tool for the job. A moray eel's canine teeth, perfect for piercing and holding on to prey that's fighting back. A parrotfish uses its incisors, which are fused into a beak, to scrape algae right off of coral. Skates have these flat, molar-like teeth that are amazing for crushing shellfish. And a catfish has what are called cardiform teeth. They're like a little Velcro pad for grasping. A perfect tooth for every single task. This insane specialization doesn't stop at the teeth. It continues right inside with the gills. See, on the inner edge of their gill arches, fish have these bony structures called gill rakers. Now, in a plankton feeder, these rakers are long, numerous, and super fine, creating a perfect sieve to filter tiny bits of food from the water. But in a predator that swallows its prey whole, the gill rakers are short and stubby so they don't get in the way. It is just a beautiful, elegant example of form perfectly matching function.
And guess what? The gut tells the exact same story of specialization. Meat, protein, is actually pretty easy to digest, so carnivores can get away with short, simple intestines. Plant matter, on the other hand, is really tough. It's packed with stuff like cellulose. Because of that, herbivores need a much, much longer, coiled intestine. That gives them enough time and surface area to break it all down and extract every last nutrient.
All right, we're at the final leg of the journey. The fish has caught its food, and it has all the right tools to process it. So now let's look at the final stage. What actually triggers the fish to eat, and how does that meal get turned into pure energy?
You know, the decision to eat is actually way more complex than you might think. It's driven by a mix of internal factors, things like the season, body temperature, or just plain old hunger. But the actual trigger often comes from the outside. For fish that feeds at night, it might be a certain smell or taste in the water. For a daytime hunter, it's all about sight and movement. And some fish can even detect the tiny vibrations of their prey using a special sense organ called the lateral line.
Okay, so once the food is swallowed, the real chemical work begins. First, stomach acid and enzymes get to work, starting to break down proteins. Then, the pancreas and liver jump in. The liver adds bile to deal with the fats, and the pancreas adds a whole cocktail of other enzymes. Finally, everything moves into the intestine, where the now tiny nutrient molecules can be absorbed straight into the bloodstream, ready to power the fish. So let's do a super quick recap. We've seen 5 core feeding strategies, 5 major types of teeth, 3 distinct gut designs, 2 primary predator styles, and it's all, every single bit of it, evolved for one single goal: turning the outside world into energy. And that leaves us with one final thing for you to chew on. Imagine an herbivorous fish, one that's perfectly adapted to eating plants. But suddenly, its environment changes and all the plants disappear. For it to survive by eating animals, what adaptation would need to change first? Would it be its teeth, the length of its gut, or would its behavior have to change before anything else? Thinking about that really gets to the heart of the pressures that drive all evolution.